pre-calculus. We are going to look at example 7, and we are going to solve some of these equations graphically. You will notice it does say graphically, and it is graphically that you're going to be using on problems in the 40s and 51 in homework. And the idea is there's not algebra here, we're using the calculator. So in order to use the calculator, it has to be in a y equals form. So the first thing we're going to do on these problems is we're going to make our equation equal to 0. That's going to be our first step. After we get our equation equal to 0, and we get that equation equal to 0, I strongly encourage you to put the 0 on the right-hand side. That's what the book will encourage. Now I'll make our graphs look the same. But once your equation is equal to 0, we can graph the equation as in y equals whatever it is. And then because, remember, we're solving these graphically, we are going to be looking for our x-intercepts. And if you recall what we've been doing lately, when we look for x-intercepts on the calculator, we use the second button, and it's the calc menu, which is on the trace button. And once in there, we use zeros. So that's going to be our plan for today. If you will, go ahead and I encourage you to try and graph these along with me. So, first thing we have to do on A is we have to do some absolute value, which is a new thing. So, I'm going to show you one way to put in absolute value, and that is using the math menu. So if you get down to the third or fourth row of your calculator, there's a math button. Everyone has a math button and a math menu, and it has lots of good information in it. So if I hit the math button, and we're looking for absolute value, which means I need to go over 1 to the right in the num menu. Notice it says ABS. That's what I'm looking for. That's absolute value. So if I hit enter, on my calculator, it's nice, it'll just give me absolute value bars. Yours might just do ABS in parentheses, and that's okay. So I'm going to fill in what I need here, which is 2x minus 1. I'm going to arrow out of the absolute value. Oh, let me pause for a moment. I forgot to actually solve the equation with you, didn't I? In my head, I already had it done. So I'll go back to that graph here in a moment. And I need to make this equation equal to 0, don't I? So we already have absolute value on the left. To get this radical on the right, it's all one expression. 3 times a radical is 1 term. So I'm going to just subtract it over to the other side. So we're going to subtract 3 square root of x plus 6. Which means I'm going to subtract 3 square root of x plus 6. When I do that, I will end up with the absolute value of 2x minus 1 minus 3 times the square root of x plus 6 equals 0. And so by one step, we were able to get the equation equal to 0. Now we will be ready to graph. And when we graph, we just take that equation and make it y equals. So y equals absolute value of 2x minus 1 minus 3 square root of x plus 6. Now, okay, let's go back to the calculator. Notice I'd already talked about putting in absolute value of 2x minus 1. I use that math menu. And now since we subtracted over that other term, I'm going to say minus 3 square root, which can be found second function of x squared, x plus 6. I'm going to do a zoom 6 because I don't know what I graphed last. And we get something like this. As I mentioned above, I just need to find my zeros. So, second, calc, 0. So it's asking left bound. So I'm going to go left of where it crosses the x-axis at -2 something there. Hit enter. Right of where it crosses the x-axis. Hit enter. And then I'm going to go back to the guess. Notice I have an answer or a 0 of negative 2.316361305. So I'm going to write that down as approximately negative 2.36. And then I see I have another one, so I'm going to repeat the process. Second, calc, 0. This time I want left bound of the 1 over, what is that, around 5, I think. So there I'm to the left of where it crosses. Enter. Now I'm to the right. Enter. And the guess, I'm going back to that area if I want. And I have a 0 of 5.6113047, which I'm going to write down as approximately 5.61. Okay. Help each other figure out how to graph those as need to, and of course I'll be back Wednesday and I can help you graph as well. Okay, let's go ahead and look at B. First of all, we're going to notice that it's not equal to 0. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get it equal to 0, which means I'm going to subtract the terms over. There's an x to the negative 1. I'm going to subtract x to the negative 1 over. There's a plus 2x. Whoops. So I'm going to subtract 2x over. When I do all of this, I'm going to have x plus 2 to the negative 1 minus x to the negative 1 minus 2x equals 0. Notice I solved it, so I have my 0 on the right-hand side. And now we are ready to graph. So we are going to graph the equation y equals x plus 2 to the negative 1 minus x to the negative 1 minus 2x. So if you will, go back to the calculator with me. I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to clear my screen. Parentheses. X plus 2, parentheses, raised to the power of negative 1, arrow out of there, minus x raised to the power of negative 1, arrow out of there, minus 2x. And now I'm going to graph that. Notice there's some stuff in the denominators because of those negative exponents. So we have some crazy little looking graph going on here. What you need to know is, where does it cross the x-axis? And you will notice how many times does it cross the x-axis? It just crosses the x-axis once. Right there at approximately negative 2 something. So I just have to find 1, 0. Second, calc, 0. So left, I have to get over to, if you just keep arrowing left in your calculator, you'll eventually get over there. I'm left of where it crosses the x-axis. Hit enter. I'm going to arrow right. And now I'm right of where it crosses the x-axis. Hit enter. I can skip back for my guess. I'm going to hit enter. And you will notice I have a 0 of negative 2.205569. I'm going to write that down as x is approximately negative 2.21. Okay, please practice with the calculators. Okay, so that's what you're going to see in the 40s. Okay, officially that section goes with the 40s. Solve them graphically. The ones in section 8, I believe officially go with 51, but it's still the same thing. Graphing on the graphy calculator and looking for where I cross the x-axis. So, nice part, it's already y equals, isn't it? So we are ready to jump right in. So I'm going to go back to y equals here. Clear my screen. 3 minus, and two options of how to enter a fraction, folks. I like to use alpha F1. If I use alpha F1, which is alpha in the y equals button, it gives me this. And I can put 1 over the square root of x squared minus 1. And that's what your graph should look like, okay? If you have to do it as a fraction, your square root would end up putting everything in parentheses in the denominator, so you'd be okay. I'm going to graph. My graph is kind of slow moving here. And as you look at this, as we're looking for where does it cross the x-axis, you know, this is a little unique. So if I try and check this out with the trace, right here where I hit trace, notice right now it's at x equals 0, which is the y-axis, y equals blank. When your y value like that is blank, what it's saying is your graph doesn't exist right there. If I start arrowing left, my x values are getting smaller. I can't see a cursor, and my y's are blank. That's saying, okay, the graph doesn't exist. All of a sudden, I go far enough, my calculator comes up as negative 1.06, and my graph exists. Now, the question is, does it have a 0? And my calculator cooperated with this earlier, so we'll try and use the calculator. If the calculator doesn't cooperate, you'd have to solve it by hand and set your equation equal to 0. But if we try and do zeros, so if I do second calc, go to number 2, 0, well, there's my left bound. I'm left of where I hope it crosses the x-axis, or it shouldn't even say cross, but touches. I'm going to hit enter. Then for my right bound, here's what I'm going to do. I'm in that zone where there is no graph, and I'm going to put my right bound there. But what it has in between it is what we hope is where it touches the x-axis. For the guess, best I can do is try and get my cursor right there and hit enter. And notice it gives me a 0. It tells me there is a 0 of negative 1.054. So one of my solutions is negative 1.054. And let me comment real quick while you guys have my calculator on your screen. Notice this 1.2 e to the negative 12th. We need to talk about that in class, but realize that is equivalent to 0. That is a very small scientific notation like 0.0000, like 11 zeros, and then 1, 2. So sometimes the calculator does that. That's just like a 0. Okay, let's check and see. And this graph looks pretty symmetric, so we can kind of guess what's going to happen on the other side. Second calc 0. I'm going to go over closer to that positive 1. Left bound is where my graph doesn't exist. Right bound is above it. The guess I can just hit enter. And notice we get a 0 at positive 1.054. So you'll notice we did end up with 2 zeros. Again, graph or failure, hidden behavior, it's all about working with your calculator, okay? Could we zoom in and see what's going on a little bit closer there? We definitely could. Okay, we got one last one to look at, and that is B. So I'm going to go to my y equals screen, and I'm going to clear my calculator. X to the third minus, that is a 1.1 x squared minus 65.4 x plus 229.5. And as I look at this, I've made some mistakes today on my own. It's not even a school day. Please check and make sure you've typed in your graph correctly, because it does make a difference. Okay, I'm going to hit graph. You see one over there at the far left. And then you see something at the far right. Now, it's kind of hard to see. Hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that. Had to pause for a moment. It's kind of hard to see what's going on there. So, since it's hard to see, we could try a zoom out option, but really what I want to see is what's going on up above at the graph. So I can kind of get a bigger picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my window, and I'm going to change the max of how high the y's go. And based on I have a 229.5, I'm going to throw in a 300 number just for my y max. That's the only thing I'm changing so I can see the rest of this graph. And I'm going to hit graph and see what it looks like. Well, it still goes off the screen. But notice there, we can kind of see a little bit better idea of what's going on. And now that I think of it, I probably should have changed. Sorry about that, everybody. My dog is being very barky, so I had to get her out of the room. Okay, what I was saying, I believe, is I feel like maybe I should have put that y value a little bit lower. So I'm actually going to go back to my window, change my y min to maybe negative 100. Just picking a random value there to get it a better view. And then maybe we can see it a little bit better. Yeah, that gives us more of a view. Okay, we can see for sure we have one place that crosses the x-axis at the left, possibly one more, possibly two more, possibly no more. So we'll zoom in on that section once we see it. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and do a second calc 0. I'm going to go way over here to the left of that number that's around negative 9. So I'm to the left of that. I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to go to the right of it. Hit enter. Arrow back for my guess. And actually that 0 is exactly negative 9. So one of my zeros is negative 9. Okay, now over on the other side, I actually think I want to zoom in some before I try and see what's going on. So I don't know if you remember me teaching ZBox, but I love ZBox. So go into the zoom menu. So when I go into the zoom, notice number 1 is ZBox. I'm going to hit enter. And remember on this one, you get to draw a box around what you want to zoom in on. So like right here, I want to see what's going on over here at the bottom of this curve. So I'm going to hit enter right there. And then I need to draw to my diagonal corner of what I want to zoom in on. Now I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to zoom, and we're going to be able to see a little bit better. It's even hard to see then, isn't it? I'm thinking it touches at least once. You can zoom in again if you'd like. I can even use ZBox again. And if I use ZBox again, it's going to give me that much closer. And by zooming in enough there, I have confidence now that I'm looking for 2 different places. So as I do my zeros, second, calc, 0. So to the left, I'm going over here to the left of where it first crosses the x-axis, hit enter. For the right, what I want to do is I want to be right there where it's below the x-axis. Hit enter, and then I'm going to go back to this area. And notice it does say there's a 0, and there's a 0 at 5. So I'm going to write that down at x equals 5. And it looks like there's one more, so I'm going to do this process again. Second, calc, 0. So this time my left bound is there between the 2. My right bound is going to be after it crosses through the x-axis. And my guess is going to go back to that area. Hit enter. And notice this time I have a 0 at 5.1. So we ended up with 3 zeros, which, notice, this was an x to the third equation. So it does make sense that it is possibly that has 3 zeros. Okay, practice the calculators. If you run into issues, catch up with me Wednesday and we can talk. Notice I have the homework written at the bottom there. Same thing you'll find on Skyward, Schoology, and in the classroom on the board. Page 74, 11, 12, 14, 20, 21, 23, 30 through 36 evens, 40 through 46 evens, and 51. Look back through the notes we've done since it's taken us several days to get through these. Use your time wisely in class. Plan on the homework being due Wednesday, beginning of the hour. Hope you guys get lots done on Tuesday, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.